So I just wanted to use this to sort of fill in a bit of a gap with the normals for the Mark 6 Gen 3 helmet. I've been in debates and conversations all weekend about whether the way that normals are being handled and interpreted in Blender, whether it's a bug since 2.79, an intended feature, an unintended side effect, yada yada yada. Been through all that. And I'll figure something out in the end. I'm not 100% sure about all of it at the moment. But to more accurately address what's going on with the modelling series, most of you will end up with a helmet much like on the left here. Which, it looks all good, like, the normals are nice and crisp, the textures look all nice, but if we just go ahead and rotate this sun lamp that I've got set up here, notice how we start to get these really nasty shadows just down on the front of the mouthpiece here. You can sort of see a bit of this bleeding up here, off to the side, and I'll just zoom out a bit, make it easier. Might not be able to get it to... Yeah, I can't get it, but I covered in episode 4 the fact that you can sort of see a bit of that bleeding down along that edge as well. So we don't want this. This isn't proper, right? It doesn't look good. Alternatively, I did mention the fact that you could go ahead and chuck a very slight bevel across the model, which gives much nicer results. But I've noticed that has an unintended side effect with the texturing process, where the curvature map that's generated just isn't proper. It doesn't work properly. I might be able to find a workaround for that and adapt my modelling process, but we'll figure that out at a different stage. The reason I model the way I do is because that's the way I've learned from other people over the course of 10 years or so now, and I've picked it up from looking at actual game models and sort of assessing those and how those work. So that's why I've taught the way I have. But this one looks a lot nicer. It's got extra geometry. It seems like I've gone through and chucked in a few extra loops onto the bevel. So it comes out really nice and crisp for everything. But the problem I have with it is that you go ahead, you model this, you chuck the bevel modifier on, and you're prone to running into a bunch of additional errors that you might need to clean up later down the track. Like you're getting some fairly messy topology, and mainly in your corners it can get a bit iffy with some of the pinching that you'll get with the bevel. So for me, it works, and I can see that it works right here because this looks nice. And if we go ahead and we rotate the sun here, we get proper fall off across the model. So possibility is I need to just go down this avenue in the future of how I teach things. It's just not my preferred thing to do. So that looks nice. But as a potential other band-aid solution, if you don't want to go through the process of, say, throwing this bevel onto your model and not having the correct curvature come out, because the biggest thing is the edge wear on it. So you'll notice on these two here that use just the base normals, we sort of get much nicer wear patterns along it. So there's a bit more variance in the chipping and everything like that. It's in the albedo of this one here, but notice how the normal isn't shining through because I've just used the exact same textures between the two, with different normals for this one. But notice how it doesn't come through. It doesn't operate properly. So that's a bit of a setback. And also the other thing with this is that you'll get a seam run down the middle of this. It's not noticeable unless you're this close, and so that's another part of it that I don't like. Once again, something I might have to learn how to figure out as well. But as an alternative solution, what we can do here, I'm just going to go ahead and hide these. And it's not perfect by any capacity. It works a little bit better. But if I just go ahead and rotate this sunlight, you notice we're still getting this artifacting here. And this is intentionally under very harsh and unflattering lighting conditions. But this material is slightly different, and what we've done here is we've disabled this bump map correction here. So if we enable it, you see you sort of get a bit more bleed. This one sort of tapers it off a bit. I wish it would take it the whole way off, but it doesn't, unfortunately. But this certainly helps with it. It makes it a little bit less noticeable under different lighting conditions. I've just intentionally gone ahead and made this really harsh to make a point of it. But what I find interesting here is, this is a bit weird, we're going to go back to Blender 2.79 here. So this is before we even had this bump map correction thing. And I understand that it was brought in as a means of fixing, intersecting rays with normals. I don't fully understand it all, but I understand there was a reason to why it was introduced. And so, once again, I'll just show you here. It'll take a little bit more to render because I can't use my GPU with 2.79 because the tech doesn't match. But our beveled one here, once again, looks crisp, looks nice. It all works. But what I find interesting is if we render this version here, right? Just grab the sun lamp. I've got to remember how to use this. And we just rotate the sun here. So it's hard to see because of the CPU rendering. But notice how we're not getting that really nasty artifact here. See how it looks nice and crisp, even with just the base normals that we have and the base mesh normals. So it looks the way it intends to. So this is where it sort of brings me into believe that there's some sort of unintended consequence with the fix that's been implemented in 2.8 and onwards, because I know that the high poly to low poly normal baking process that I've demonstrated in the tutorial series, I know it works, and I can see that it works properly here. And it gives us nice results, and it gives us those nice results without needing to do that bevel, because here these two look almost identical. It's just that the one on the right has more topology, doesn't really change the render times or anything, but these both work as you'd expect them to. And it's just confusing that despite these fixes, we're still getting this normal bleeding here, and even with this bump map correct supposedly trying to emulate the way it worked before 2.8, still not quite getting there. It's a bit frustrating, and it's understandable that Cycles is a ray traced render engine, and so if we switch over to something like Eevee, which is a raster engine, you don't run into these same complexities, right? So like all three of these, I think these two would actually technically still be the same, but they all look nice. But yeah, so the crux of this is that for following along with the tutorial and doing all the normals and modeling and everything, these are your best two options here. So you can go along with the bevel. You might run into some other issues with it that you can work out through clamping and what have you. Or if you don't want to go down that avenue, there is the option to go ahead and turn off this bump map correction. But I just wanted to give that update to show that there are solutions if you have run into it. If not, then it will just be a matter of me revisiting the last 10 years of what I've learned in modelling and just adapting to meet the standards of a ray-traced render engine like Cycles. So, yeah, anyway guys, that's all I've got for you today.